You might recall, maybe not, but you might recall one day I was telling you that the 2016 test was probably the toughest free response question test that there had ever been. And that's the one that we're looking at today. So in 2016, this document's 23 pages of directions. So right away, you know you're in for a pretty tough test if the directions take up that much room. This first question, even though it involves an array of strings, it's unlike anything we'll probably see in 2020 for a couple of reasons. One is you have to write an entire class, which we don't believe we're going to have to do. And then in part B, they're using the words extends from an inheritance situation and super, and we're not going to see those words in 2020 because they were in Unit 9, and so we're not covering that. But if, it's still a pretty good question to review because it does involve an array and an array list and some ideas of methods and control structures. So they give you an array of strings and then they hand it to the constructor. All right, so we're writing the entire class. So we're going to have to create a constructor that accepts an array of strings. Typically at that point, to hold on to those strings, we might make a copy of that array, maybe make our own string array and just hand off the memory address. But they tell us later on that that's probably not a good idea because it says right here that the constructor nor any of the methods should alter the parameter passed to the constructor. But then they give us a big hint. They say that your implementation may copy the contents of the array. So we're writing the class. We have a lot of freedom here to how we want to do this. And part of this problem is that we're going to randomly choose a string from the array, and then we never want to see that string again. So it'd be nice if we could remove it. Removing from an array is difficult because you have to keep altering the length. And you'd have to be really careful to not mess with the original one since you're sharing memory addresses if you're not careful. It'd be really nice if we could have an array list as opposed to an array. It would make removal of used strings much easier. Well, since we're writing the class ourselves, there's no reason we can't do that. We'll make the instance field an array list, and then we'll just handle it the way that we want to. Now, you could do this with an array. There's actually a nice way kind of compared to like selection sort for how you could shuffle within the array without actually changing the length of it, yet making parts of the array unavailable as you choose future random pieces. So there are some things that you could do here with a 1D array, but an array list just makes it easier. And then we'll have to write this method, get next, it's parameterless, and it gives us a randomly selected string. All right, I've gone ahead and just written out the solution for you here since we're probably not going to have to write a complete class anyway. And if you are going to use an array list, you will have to import java.util.arraylist, okay? It's at the minimum. All right. So I made a private array list that only holds strings, and then in my constructor, I initialized that array list. So I declared it as an instance field, then in the constructor, I initialized it. And then I looped through every string that belonged to the words array, handing one at a time to this copy.add statement. And the order here doesn't matter at all because we're randomly selecting the strings anyway. All right, in my get next method, I made sure to return type string, kept the method parameterless. Now, I'm going to remove strings as this process goes. So eventually I might run out. When that happens, they told us to just return all caps none. Okay, so that's what we see right here. And if I am not out of strings, then I need to randomly pick one. Okay, so I need to cast math.random to an int. And let's see, I need one more set of parentheses in there. Okay, so math.random times the size of the array list. Don't add 1 because we want to include index 0 potentially, and then cast it down to the int level. Remember, whatever you remove from this array list gets returned by the remove method, and it would be returned as a string, and then I will end up returning that string as my string return for the get next method. Okay, so that's part A. We have to actually do a little bit of work in part B before we can run part A. And so in part B, this will definitely not be on your 2020 test because we won't see the keyword extends and we won't see the keyword super. but it is still good practice of this concept of methods and control structures. So the key here is when you write a subclass constructor, okay, because we're extending a superclass, the very first thing you have to always consider in that scenario is there something I need to satisfy in the superclasses constructor? And the answer in this question would be yes, because we already know that our superclass constructor is demanding a one-dimensional array of strings from us. So unless we're giving a one-dimensional array of strings, then we're not really a random string chooser. Remember, random letter chooser is a random string chooser, so it has to do that basic thing. So where am I going to get an array of strings from? They only gave me a string. How can I turn that into an array of strings? Well, don't write code to do it. They gave you a method that actually has return type string array. So if you give it a string, it gives you a string array. And like I said, that's not a coincidence that they just happen to give you a method that gives you exactly what you want. So the real key here to part B is it's just a one-line answer. Remember, the word super has to be the very first word within that subclass constructor. It can't go anywhere else. We have to call that local method, even though we don't know how it's going to work. The implementation was not shown. We just have to trust it, and we have to trust the fact that if we give it a string, it gives us back an array of strings. Then that array of strings would actually get passed right up here to become what I've called words, and then it would work within this superclass. So if we give this a run, looks like I got an extra something. Let's see. I think I need one more parenthesis. Sorry about that. So let's see what happens. All right, this is random, so we don't really know what's going to happen right here. Oh, and I forgot, in the main, I have to turn on part B. All right, and yeah, this is all random, so wheels the bus on, and then notice that we got none twice. And then I gave it Brian Zerla, and I ran the loop 13 times. Now there's 10 letters in my name. So what you see there is the 10 letters of my name randomly jumbled around, and then it kept calling, so it actually called 3 more times, so we see the word none there 3 times. And you could change it around if you wanted to. You could put in a different string to test in part B, you know, or whatever. You could put Arcadia there or whatever. You could change around part A. But yeah, like I said, it is all random, so we don't really know what result we'll get, but this does appear to be working the way they want it to.